One time, my cousins invited me to go drink with them at a house party. So I called them to pick me up since I knew I was going to drink a lot. A few hours later, I had a few too many drinks and was getting drunk. Later that night, at the end of the party, one of my cousin who was the destination driver took me to my house. I got out, all drunk, and told my cousin he didn't have to wait for me to go inside. He nodded, told me to have a good night, and took off. I was so drunk that when I got to my lawn, the grass felt so comfortable and soft that I just laid down and took a nap. I'm not sure how much time had passed, but I suddenly woke up feeling cold. I was so drunk still that I didn't want to get up, so I just tried to cuddle myself to warm my body up. After a few minutes, as I was laying on my side, I suddenly heard footsteps coming towards me from my back. It wasn't a normal footstep sound, but it sounded like someone was dragging their feet. Thinking back, I should have known something was off, but at that moment, my mind couldn't register anything wrong with the situation due to the drunkenness state I was in. When the sound came right up to me, I turned around and saw a woman wearing what I think was a Hmong traditional dress. I'm not sure, because I was so drunk that I couldn't see clearly. All I know was that I saw green, black, and red, which are usually associated with the color of our traditional clothes. In my drunkenness state, I didn't think clearly, so I stared at her while she was staring back at me, with a tint of a smile on her face. She suddenly cleared her throat, but for me, the sound felt so weird. It felt like someone was crying, yet at the same time, was laughing. She asked me if I would let her lie down beside me, since she was so tired on her journey to her home and wanted to take a break. I nodded my head, so she laid down right beside me, in a position that one would usually see at a funeral of the dead body in a coffin. Staring up. She noticed I was shivering from the cold, so she slowly turned her head towards me and whispered,
"Here, take my blanket and cover yourself up."
I took it and covered it so that only my face was out. She didn't turn her head back and just kept staring at me. A few minutes later, I saw her reaching her hands towards me, and when she was about to touch my face, there was suddenly the sound of my front door being opened. Her hands suddenly stopped in midair, and she turned to look at the direction of the sound. I thought it was my parents, and was about to turn to say something when a stranger voice sounded out from the front door.
"Child, this is not your house. Leave the boy alone. Please don't embarrass my family and go on your way. There are many eyes watching you guys at this time, so don't do something inappropriate."
The woman looked at the direction of the voice for a few moments and just slowly got up. She looked at me again with one hand covering her face, chuckling, and told me she will be on her way now. I wasn't sure what was happening, but I still knew that I have never heard that voice before in my life. I slowly turned my body around to look at the direction of the front door. I couldn't make it out clearly since it was so dark. There was only a small light coming from the moon to the door, so all I saw was a dark shape. The dark shape stood there for a second and just slowly went in and closed the door. I just thought that perhaps someone came to visit my parents and was staying overnight. My head was hurting from the beers, so I just wrapped the blanket closer to me, closed my eyes, and dozed off. I woke up the next morning and was still laying on the grass. I suddenly remember what happened during the night and thought it was just a dream, but then I realized I was holding on to something. I looked at my hands, and to my horror, I was holding onto a red sash. I suddenly let go of it and ran inside. I told my parents about it, and they did a shaman ritual for me. The shaman said that while I was laying down outside, a ghost who was on her journey to her house in a faraway place saw me and came to lay down beside me. When the ghost was about to touch my soul, the spirit of our house came out and told the ghost to go away and leave me alone. We had to kill a rooster to thank our guardian spirit for protecting me. Ever since that day, I have never slept outside drunk again. I used to dream of this Hmong girl. Not just once or twice, but many times. Whenever I dreamed of her, she would always ask me to stay and live with her. I always refused, because even though it was a dream, somehow, I already knew that she was not human. One time I didn't want to see her anymore, so in the dream, I told her that she should move on. She was not happy about it. After that, my dreams of her became unbearable. She would always appear in a rotten state before me, asking me to look at her face. When I refused, she would always put her face right next to mine, so that even if I didn't look at her, I could still feel her sticky and wet face on my arms. It got so bad to the point where I used to wake up in the middle of the night, seeing shadows of her. I remember waking up one night, trying to move my legs to a better position, when I suddenly felt my leg touching someone who was standing at the foot of the bed. I realized immediately that at this time of night, no one should be standing there in total darkness. I knew it then that it was a ghost that I had just touched. After a brief moment, I felt her pulling my blanket down, slowly but surely. My heart was thumping so hard, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Right when the blanket was pulled all the way down, I suddenly could move again. So I jumped up to pull my blanket back and cover myself with it. One day, I heard my cousin say that to prevent a ghost from appearing before me in my sleep, I have to put a peach branch next to my pillow. I found one, put it right next to where I was sleeping, and dozed off, only to dream of her telling me that the peach branch was useless, and that it would not work against her. As if to prove her point, I suddenly woke up after that, and saw a shadow near my bed, just standing there, looking at me. I freaked out, and just closed my eyes and prayed she would go away. This happened so many times, so one day I've had enough, and told my parents about it. They did a shaman ritual for me, and afterward, the shaman told my parents not to worry anymore. For a few weeks after that, I slept peacefully and did not have any bad dreams anymore. But then a month later, I suddenly had a dream where I was standing in a house, next to a closet. Her voice told me to open the closet, go in, and looked at her. She said that if I could look at her face without looking away, she would leave me alone forever. I went in, walked along a hallway, and came to another door. I opened the door, and I saw her, hanging in a room from her neck. Her face was so rotten that I just wanted to look away. But I decided then that I would look at her straight in the eyes. I looked at her face, and then after a few moments, her face started changing into a pretty girl. She looked at me sadly, and told me that in her last life, she hanged herself, so she cannot go reincarnate until her punishment was over. She said she was just lonely, that's why she kept bothering me. She told me to have a good life. I suddenly woke up, and from then on, I did not dream of her anymore. Once in a blue moon, I would think of her, wishing her punishment would be over, so she can go to her next life. One time, on a good sunny day, perfect for fishing, I asked my friends if they would go with me to catch some fish. Sadly, all of them were busy that day. I didn't want to waste such a good day, so I went all by myself to the lake. While the weather was good, I couldn't say the same for my fishing spot. A few hours in, I knew I had to switch spot before the sun goes down, or I will be going home empty-handed. I walked a bit and came to a spot where there was a tree right at the edge of the water. There were bushes surrounding the tree, so I had to force myself through it. While I was walking in and grabbing some branches to move out of the way, some branches suddenly scratched my eyes. I instinctively closed my eyes and rubbed them hard. After feeling that the pain subsided a bit, I slowly opened my eyes, but it was still watery and cloudy. Through such a sight, I thought I saw a woman sitting down at the spot I was planning on going to, looking at me with a red sash wrapping around her neck. I closed my eyes again and rubbed them to remove any waters that are blocking my vision. I opened them again, but I didn't see anything. I persuaded myself that maybe I was just imagining it, but at the back of my head, My brain was already in full alert, ready to run at any sudden movement. I went to the spot, looked around, and sat down. Only a minute passed by when I suddenly stood up and ran for my dear life, even leaving my expensive fishing gears behind. I ran so fast to my car, and when I was about to get in, I suddenly felt my foot being stuck, as if something or someone was holding onto it. I pulled my foot so hard that my shoe came off, but I didn't dare look at whatever was holding onto it or picking up my shoe. I just jumped in my car, turned on the engine, and drove away, leaving particles of dirt everywhere. To this day, I still shiver whenever I think of the memory. Back then, when I was sitting down and casted my fishing line out, the hook suddenly got stuck on the tree branch on top of me, or so I thought. I didn't look up. I just pulled my fishing pole hard, trying to get the hook out of the tree, when all of a sudden, I felt the hook came loose, dropping into the water. When the hook came down, I saw that it had been stuck on a huge pine cone, dragging it down with it into the water. I was about to get up to retrieve the hook, when I suddenly realized that it was not a huge pine cone that was stuck onto the hook. It was a head of a girl, looking right at me, with the hook stuck on the edge of her mouth. I still haven't gone to pick up my fishing gears, because I do not dare to go again.